Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
This society needs a spectacle. It might help us to see some people.
On A View from the Outside this week being the 6th of November 2021, we look at health care, with the view being that the evidence is mounting up that the regime in St Vincent and the Grenadines continues to ignore the cries of the ordinary people to provide health care which is adequate for all in the country. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, the OHCHR, states that health care is a fundamental human right, indispensable for the exercise of other human rights. Every human being is entitled to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health conducive to living a life of dignity. And it goes on to state that access to health care is a fundamental human right and must be protected. And the World Health Organization, the WHO, since its formation on the 7th of April 1948, said, the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition. It is against that backdrop, and with what is dispensed as health care in the country, that we, on A View from the Outside, say that the regime continues to ignore the cries of ordinary Vincentians to provide health care which is adequate for every Vincentian. It is no secret that for years now, and certainly throughout the 20-plus year life of the Unity Labour Party, the ULP regime in St Vincent and the Grenadines, the cries of the people have been getting louder when it comes to the inadequacy of healthcare in the country. Such inadequacy has been highlighted by many people in various quarters up and down the country. People have been chronicling their experiences and have been talking about them with their friends and neighbors, in their communities, on the airways, and on various social media platforms. Luzette King, Robert Patches Knights King, and other members of the front line have on different occasions staged protests outside the main hospital in Kingstown to highlight the deplorable conditions and the total lack of basic medication and supplies which exist there in the country and elsewhere up and down the country. The sad thing is, as the cries of the people continue to grow louder, there is very little or no sign that the regime is prepared or equipped to improve the appalling state of healthcare in the country. In fact, some years ago, they publicly declared that as far as they are concerned, the Vincentian people are more interested in leadership, their leadership, because they said their own survey revealed to them that their leadership is rated higher than health care by the Vincentians they surveyed. That statement alone is indicative of their attitude and their disinclination to provide adequate health care in the country. During the elections of December 2015, the New Democratic Party, the NDP, revealed plans to build a state-of-the-art hospital to cater for the healthcare needs of Vincentians. However, those plans were ridiculed by the ULP and their agents. Come elections November 2020, they told the electorate that they will build a state-of-the-art hospital. To date, there has been no sign of that, nor have they presented any plans on how they intend to make the current health facilities in the country fit for purpose until their promised state-of-the-art hospital is built. Over the years, the examples have been numerous, and Vincentians, ordinary Vincentians, are left to accept what is provided as health care simply because they cannot afford to fly out and seek proper health care abroad. Vincentians will remember the warnings that were signaled by the late Oscar Allen in a letter addressed to the hospital administrator and copied to other health administrators in the country. The letter, which he requested to be published, was dated the 14th of July, 2017. And he sadly died on the 28th of July, 2017, 1 week after receiving surgery, which he said was cancelled on more than one occasion due to the lack of anesthesiologists at the hospital. In that letter, he highlighted the inadequacies which existed at the time, and he said that he needed the letter published because he hoped that the public exposure will have such matters rectified. Sadly, he passed away. Vincentians will remember also the appalling scenes revealed in a video that went viral in April 2021, when a woman was allowed to deliver her baby on the floor of the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, when it was alleged that the baby's head struck the hard concrete floor. Since that video, the Minister of Health acknowledged the incident in a post on his personal Facebook page. In his post, he promised a, quote, thorough investigation, unquote, to what he described as, quote, a disturbing occurrence, unquote. To date, Vincentians are still awaiting the results of any such thorough investigation or any investigation at all. There are many more unfortunate incidents when ordinary Vincentians had to simply suffer their fate, F-A-T-E, when it comes to the inadequacy of healthcare in the country. And there is no doubt that long after this program, many of you are going to be identifying and discussing the various examples of which you are aware. You no doubt will highlight when you, a family member, or someone you know was faced with the deplorable and dilapidated condition, or with the lack of medication and supplies, or when you had to depend on borrowing and begging for assistance to afford the exorbitant cost of medication. Sadly, while ordinary Vincentians have to accept their fate when it comes to healthcare in the country, two recent events continue to highlight the total insufficiency of what is provided and how others do not have to settle for what ordinary Vincentian people are served out. The first of those two events involved Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of the country. And it's worthy to note that he has been in office now for over 20 years. He sustained a bruising to his head after he left the safety of his secured vehicle and ventured into a crowd of protesters in Kingstown who were protesting his government on a plethora of issues, including the lack of accountability and transparency, the $95 million, which the Director of Audit said is missing from the nation's purse, the change in the Public Health Act to make vaccine mandatory, and the injustice and victimization meted out to a section of the Vincentian society. Having sustained that bruising to his head, he went to the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital for a brief period, and then he flew out to Barbados on the same day for treatment, including getting an MRI scan. The second incident involved the former Prime Minister, Sir James Mitchell, who is ailing and spent a few days at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital before being flown out to Barbados for further treatment. We understand he's still there in Barbados. These two incidents clearly show that the health care that is provided in the country is wholly inadequate, and that it is only if one can afford to fly out of the country to go elsewhere that such health care needs could be met. The regime in St Vincent and the Grenadines needs to stop playing Russian roulette with the lives of Vincentians and provide health care in keeping with the UN and the WHO. Instead of denigrating and ridiculing the likes of Dr. Goodluck and others for highlighting the deplorable conditions in clinics and the presence of mold in the hospital, the regime needs to put those efforts into remedying and rectifying the inadequacy in healthcare which exists in the country. They need to answer the cries of the people and ensure that there is proper health care in place so that when Vincentians return home to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to live or to settle from various countries in the Vincentian diaspora, including the United Kingdom, England in particular, Canada, and the USA, they don't have to pack up months later or a few years later and leave the country because they cannot cope with the deplorable conditions and specifically the inadequacy of healthcare which exists. Rather than concentrate on wrecking the lives of individuals and families by adding to the already long list of unemployment with their vaccine mandate, the regime needs to put provisions in place to cater for the inadequate long-term health care needs in the country. Rather than putting so much effort into victimizing citizens, they need to concentrate on putting adequate health care in place, which will attract rather than deter tourists who wish to come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Rather than bragging at the UN about having made strides in human rights, when in fact breaches of human rights are rampant in the country, the regime needs to seek help to remedy the deplorable conditions which exist in healthcare. They need to use the special relationship which they boast about having with Cuba so that they can get help to improve the healthcare situation and improve the health and lives of many ordinary Vincentians. Vincentians, we here on A View from the Outside say that the time has come to demand more. The time has come to let the regime know that you know that access to health care is a fundamental human right and that they cannot continue to get away with trying to hoodwink and bamboozle you. And in making your demand, let them know what the WHO said, and I quote, "The enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition." Until next week, Justin and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with a reminder to send your feedback as usual to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. We also invite you to visit and like our Facebook page at A View from the Outside. And we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at JMB Hall. Have a pleasant Saturday, have a wonderful Sunday, and a productive week ahead as you make demands for the provision of adequate health care